Hello everyone, this is Miss Soma. So now I'll be discussing simple interest. Okay, so now simple interest is really just similar to the previous percent problems that we have. And I want to stick to that same strategy unless you develop your own. Alright, so let's look at this one. So simple interest is really just like borrowing money or depositing money to the bank. And if you don't pay it right away, so you would have to pay after 2 years, then you would pay interest towards that. Or if you deposit money in the bank and then you don't withdraw the money until after 3 years, then you will earn some interest. In other words, you're making some money. All right, so I'm gonna just draw a representation here, and I'm really sorry with my congestion. Every time I go outside, I really get congested when I get back into the house. So, your original amount that you deposited or you borrowed from the bank will earn an interest. And then you will have your total amount. So let's say if the original amount is, let's say, you borrowed that certain amount, it will earn some interest, and then you will pay more after several years. And then, or if you deposited some money in the bank and you don't take it out after 2 years, you will earn some interest. Then after 2 years, you will have more money in the bank than your original amount. So let's put this into an example. So let's say we borrowed. So we borrowed, let's say we borrowed $2,000 for 4 years. Okay, at an interest rate of 5%. All right. So now we're gonna do the same strategy we did in our previous proportion and percent problems. So our original amount is 2,000. That's your 100%. All right. So now our rate is 5%. So I'll put it where percent is. And that's X. Okay. So now we will do 100 times X is equal to 2,000 times 5. So now we end up with X is equal to 100. So X is equal to 100. And that is your interest just for 1 year. All right. So for 1 year, you would have to give the bank $100. However, since we were borrowing this for 4 years, so we would have to multiply this by 4. So now you would end up paying $400 on top of what you borrowed from the bank. So your interest for 4 years is $400. So in return, you would have to give back $2,400 back to the bank. All right? So now what I'm going to do is, because sometimes in a word problem, you'll be asked to determine how much is the interest rate or how much is the principal amount or how long should it take you to pay off the loan. So we're going to come up with a formula to make it easier. So now I'm going to use words to describe these numbers I have here so that we can derive our formula. Sometimes the original amount is also considered the principal amount. Okay, so now I'm going to use the word principal to describe your $2,000. So now this is principal amount over 100%. The X was our interest per year. So now this is interest in just 1 year over our 5% is our interest rate. Okay? And what we did was we cross multiply. So now we have interest. So I'm just going to use I for interest. 100 times 100% is equal to principal times the rate. So I'm just going to make it P for principal and R for the rate. All right, now to get a formula for my interest, I would have to divide by 100%. So now I is equal to P over R over 100%. This is again for just 1 year. Now, you see the rate here of 5%, we can simplify this. Still I equals PR, but then R is now in terms of decimal notation instead of percent notation. Now, since this is just for 1 year, to make, to turn it into a formula that we can use for X number of years, then we'll just simply multiply this by the number of years, which is represented by T, which stands for time. All right, so now your formula is I is equal to PRT, but your R here, the interest rate, is going to be in terms of decimal because we already divided it by 100. All right, so now let's try some word problems. All right, so let's see. Let's try. We borrowed borrowed again. We borrowed $400. Okay. And then at an interest rate of 10%. Let's just do 10%. At an interest rate of 10% for 5 years. My congestion seems to have gotten better. Okay, so now you will know when to use the formula I equals PRT, because in the word problem you will see the word interest. Whenever you see the word interest, always think of I equals PRT right away. So now I see interest. So now I'm going to have I, P, R, T. Now I'd like you to put the values of each variable first, then put them in the formula. All right, so our principal amount, so the original amount that we borrowed is $400. Our interest rate is 10%. So the rate is 10%. And then the time in years is 5 years. So 5. Again, don't forget that we have to change our 10% into decimal. All right, so now let's use our formula. I equals PRT. All right, so we don't know our I. So let's just leave it as I. We know our P, which is 400. We know our rate, which is 0.1. The time is 5. And you just multiply them all. So that would give us $200. So that means our interest for 5 years is $200. Okay, so now if in the test I say how much is the interest, then your answer is just $200. But if my question is how much would you pay back to the bank, so that means you would have to pay back your 400, you also have to pay back your 200, so your total is $600. All right, so let's try another problem here. So let's see. So let's try finding the rate this time. All right, so I have a problem here. So let's see. At what interest rate per annum, meaning per year, per annum. will $400 yield at an interest of $78 for in 1.5 years. All right, so again, at what interest rate per annum will $400 yield at an interest of $78 in 1.5 years, in 1.5 years? Okay, so again, always put your IPRT. Okay, so how much should we borrow here? We borrowed $400. All right, so $400. All right, so now the interest of 78. So that $78 is your interest. So that's your I. Okay, and for how long? 1.5 years. All right. Then we don't know how much is the interest rate. So now that would be X. All right? Or this is just about borrowing money. We could also say, oh, you deposited $400 and then after 1.5 years you made $78 out of it. And then now so what is your interest rate if that's what if you made $78 in 1.5 years? So now let's do our I equals PRT. All right, so you know how we did our evaluating expressions? That's just what it is here. So you are going to put the value of I, which is 78. And then the principal is 400. And then we don't know R. And then the time is 1.5. All right, so now we can multiply 400 and 1.5. So that gives us 600. All right, now usually this is when your mistakes come in. You would you will divide this by 78. Now, always remember, you are solving equations here. So, 600 times R. So, you focus on what is being done to R. So, now, instead of multiplying 600 times R, we could just do divide by 600 in order to get that value of R. So now your rate is 0.13, which you would have to convert it back to percent. That means your rate is 13%. So if you're depositing this money and you will make $78 after 1.5 years, this is a very good interest rate. 13% is actually high for an interest rate of any money you deposited to the bank. Alright, so let's try another problem wherein we're looking for the time. So let's say time is our unknown here. So so you're gonna do the same thing. So let's try a problem, for example. In how many years let's see, in how many years will $400 again yield an interest of $112 at 14% simple interest. So everything that we're doing here are all simple interest. We are doing it per year. All right. So now I see the word interest, so I'm gonna write PRT. All right, so how many years will $400 yield? So our original amount here is $400. So that will go to the principal amount, 400. An interest of $112. So the interest of that 400 is 112. So now that belongs to your interest. At 14% simple interest rate, so my rate is 14%, which is 0.14, and I don't know how long would it take me to make that $112 interest from my original amount of $400. So that is unknown. So now we're going to put the formula I equals PRT. So now we're going to substitute the value of I, which is 112. Our principal is 400. The rate is 0.14, and we don't know the time. Okay? So now we just multiply 400 times 0.14 equals 56 times the time is equal to 112. So then we're reversing the equation here. We're reversing the operation that is being applied to your time. So instead of 5 times 56, you do divide by 56 in order to get the value of time. So 112 divided by 56, that gives me 2 years. Okay? And if you want to do more practice on simple interest, you can always go to your IXL account and just type in simple interest, and then it will pop into the drop down menu, and then you practice that those exercises. And if you don't know your IXL credentials, just shoot me an email, and then I will send you your credentials. All right, till next time. Bye bye.